Hello and welcome back to Speak Peace to My Soul. Today we're diving into one of the most important gospel truths. Blessings come after the trials of our faith. This principle is so rich, so full of meaning, that we'll be sharing several quick dives on this very theme. Each one will explore a different layer of what it means to endure, to trust the Lord, and to discover His promised strength on the other side of difficulty. In this episode, we'll begin with Doctrine and Covenants 103 and Elder Jorge M. Alvarado's message, After the Trial of Our Faith. So join me as we start exploring how God shapes us through trials, preparing us for His blessings.
Hello and welcome. Have you ever felt that your biggest blessings, your most profound spiritual witnesses, only came after your biggest struggles? Well, in our study of the Doctrine and Covenants this week, we're going to explore that very principle. It's one of the most powerful and, honestly, one of the most challenging ideas in the gospel, that blessings come after the trial of our faith. So let's jump right in. Welcome to this quick dive into the Come Follow Me lesson for Doctrine and Covenants sections 103 and 105. If you'd like a more in-depth study, you can find a link in the description for the complete discussion on sections 102 through 105. This is brought to you by the Speak Peace to My Soul channel. Okay, so to really get our heads around this principle, we have to go back in time to a really defining moment in early church history, Zion's camp. The Lord commanded this huge undertaking, this march to Missouri, to help the saints who had been just violently driven from their homes. And yeah, it was absolutely a test of physical endurance, but that was really just the surface. At its very core, this was a profound trial of faith. I mean, let's just pause and think about the sheer scale of this challenge. We're talking about a 1,000-mile journey, mostly on foot, through brutal summer heat with hardly enough food and water. And then, after all of that sacrifice, the mission fails. They don't get the land back, and the whole thing is disbanded. By any worldly measure, you'd have to look at this and call it a complete failure. So that brings us right to the question, doesn't it? How on earth could this possibly be seen as a success? Just imagine being one of those saints. You're exhausted, you're disappointed, you're probably confused. How do you find God in an outcome like that? And this is where we're invited to shift our whole perspective from what we expect to what the Lord is actually trying to teach us. Because when we make that shift, when we look a little closer, we see the Lord wasn't really focused on reclaiming property. He was forging something way more valuable. Through this exact experience, He was teaching a timeless doctrine about His pattern for blessing His people. And as it turns out, He was building the future leaders of His church. And it's right here, in the middle of what looks like a total failure, that the Lord reveals the entire point. As you can see in this verse from D&C 103, for after much tribulation come the blessings. Now, this wasn't some consolation prize. The Lord is teaching a pattern. The trial itself was the necessary path to the blessing He had waiting, a blessing of experience, of testimony, of power, something far greater than just getting some land back. And this divine pattern isn't a one-off thing, unique to Zion's camp. It's echoed all through the scriptures. Elder Jorge M. Alvarado pointed to this really famous verse from Moroni, which says the exact same thing, just in a different way. Ye receive no witness until after the trial of your faith. It shows that faith isn't just passively believing. It's an active principle. It's something that has to be tested before the witness or the miracle can really come.
So how does this principle from church history and the Book of Mormon actually apply to us? Well, Elder Alvarado shared some powerful, modern stories that help us see how this exact pattern is just as active in our lives today. This whole idea really challenges our patience, doesn't it? Elder Alvarado tackled this head-on by sharing this powerful teaching from Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. The core message here is that the Lord's promise of blessings is absolutely certain. The real question isn't if they will come, but when. Our true test of faith is to trust Him, whether those blessings come soon, late, or maybe even not until the next life. Elder Alvarado then shared this beautiful story from his own childhood that just shows this principle in action. So as you see here, his parents felt a prompting to take their family to be sealed in the temple. But then, right on cue, the trial came. His sister got gravely ill. Can you imagine that choice? They prayed again, and the prompting to go was confirmed. They had to act in faith. They had to proceed despite this huge obstacle. And the result? The blessing of healing came, but only after they had finished their journey and were sealed. It's a perfect, modern example of the blessing coming after the trial.
And that story wasn't just a one-time blessing for the Alvarado family. It became this foundational experience, a legacy of faith that would pass down through generations. And this really highlights our own sacred responsibility. It's not just about believing these principles, it's about living them in a way that builds faith for our own kids and grandkids. So where do we get the strength to endure our own trials like that? Well, President Nelson points us directly to the temple. He taught that the covenants we make there are the key, the absolute key, to strengthening our lives, our families, and our ability to push back against the adversary. The temple is where we access the power to press forward with faith, just like the Alvarado family did. Then Elder Alvarado shared this really simple but profound parable about the power of our personal example. So on one hand, you have a mother's request. She brings her son to a wise man and asks for his help to get the boy to stop eating so much candy. But the advice she gets is kind of puzzling. The wise man just tells her to go home and come back in 2 weeks. So they leave, probably a little confused, and they come back 2 weeks later. This time, the wise man looks at the boy and tells him to stop eating so much candy. The mother, grateful but still curious, asks him, "Why didn't you just say that the first time?" And his reply is just a masterclass in integrity. 2 weeks ago, I was still eating too much candy myself. Wow. Our example only has power when we are striving to live what we teach. That wise man's personal integrity is the very heart of what President Nelson has taught about a home-centered church. The real work of the gospel isn't just what happens on Sunday. Our church buildings are there to support what happens in our homes. Our personal example, day in and day out, is where faith is truly forged for the next generation. And when we live with that kind of integrity, when we endure our own trials, and we really try to be that righteous example, the results are they're beautiful and they're multi-generational. We become a strong link in a chain of faith that blesses everyone who comes after us. You see this pattern of faith being passed down all through the scriptures. I mean, think about it, from Enos and his just father, to the stripling warriors who trusted their mother's faith completely. And hey, even Zion's camp, the so-called failure we started with, fits this pattern perfectly. It wasn't about reclaiming land. It was about forging faithful future leaders for the church. At the end of the day, after all the doctrine and the stories, Elder Alvarado brings it all down to this one simple, powerful witness from his own life. I know, he says, miracles come after the trial of our faith. And that's not just a nice quote. It's a promise, born of experience, that we can hold on to during our own trials. So as we wrap up, I'd invite you to just take a moment and ponder. Whether you feel like you're on a 1,000-mile march like Zion's camp, or you're facing a personal trial like the Alvarado family, what message from these teachings was meant specifically for you today? What is the Lord trying to forge within you through the trial of your faith?
This is only the beginning of our journey into the truth that blessings come after the trial of faith. In the next quick dive, we'll continue exploring how the Lord refines and prepares His people through experiences that may be hard in the moment, but powerful in their eternal purpose. So stay with us through this series as we uncover how endurance, trust, and patience open the way for God's promises. Until next time, may we remember Him more, follow Him closer, and rejoice in His light. If you enjoyed today's study, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit from it.